Today is December 10th, 2024, which is the International Human Rights Day. Now, Uganda will join the world to commemorate this wonderful day, which is the International Human Rights Day, under the national theme that focuses on environmental rights, reducing inequalities in the enforcement of environmental rights, and in the mitigation of the impact of environmental degradation in Uganda. Now, today's dialogue is going to focus on equality, reducing inequalities, and advancing human rights. You at home can be part of this dialogue using the hashtags human rights, equality, social justice, UDHR, stand up for rights, and inclusion. Just go to our social media platforms and look out for NTV Uganda and use those hashtags that I have mentioned earlier. And be sure to share your experience. What do you know about human rights and what does this day mean to you? Now, today's discussion is brought to you by the Refugee Law Project, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Advocacy for Torture Survivors, or African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims in Uganda. I have three wonderful panelists whom I'm going to introduce to you, and they'll say a word or two to introduce themselves and what they do. On my immediate left is Conrad Chimbugwe, a legal officer at the Refugee Law Project. Mr. Chimbugwe, good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Segara.
Yes.
Our esteemed viewers, as introduced, my name is Mr. Conrad Jeremy Chimbugwe. I'm a lawyer and an advocate working with the Refugee Law Project that's out of School of Law, Makerere University. Okay. And I'm very happy to be on this wonderful panel today to discuss pertinent issues that affect people world over. You know, human rights is there for all of us. And I'm very happy that we're celebrating a day to commemorate human rights. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here and have
Indeed.
This discussion with my colleagues.
And before I move on from you, what does Refugee Law Project do?
So the Refugee Law Project, as the name, some people may get confused and only think that we deal with legal issues of refugees, but we're out of School of Law and we basically deal with forced migrants. So we have 5 thematic programs and we deal with a range of issues that are facing refugees. So we have the Access to Justice program, which literally handles legal issues, legal access for refugees, legal aid. We have media for social change. We have mental health and psychosocial well-being. We have a governance program coming out of that. So we do a lot of things for refugees. So it's not only the legal, but all issues that deal with refugees, we try and fall in there and handle.
All right.
Yes.
And moving on to the middle, a man who I've been told has the money. Mr. Viona Vyekamadi, the Director of Research, Education and Documentation, Uganda Human Rights Commission. Is that true? Is the rumor true?
No, that is untrue. I don't know who is misinforming.
Indeed, it's good to have you here, sir.
It's a pleasure and a good afternoon to our viewers. Today is International Human Rights Day. It's a day we take seriously as the Uganda Human Rights Commission and all human rights defenders world over. Indeed. I'm happy to associate with the discussion on matters of human rights.
A little bit of about Human Rights Commission. What is the mandate in your organization?
The mandate of the Uganda Human Rights Commission is broadly to protect and promote human rights in Uganda. Yeah. It's the National Human Rights Institution established under Article 51 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. We broadly do human rights education, human rights monitoring, and also resolution of complaints of human rights violations. Today being International Human Rights Day, we look at the entire spectrum of human rights, civil and political rights, economic, social, cultural rights, and collective rights. Sometimes what we call solidarity rights or group rights. And that's where environmental rights fall. Because once the environment is degraded, it doesn't affect an individual. It affects us together as a village, as a district, as a country, as a continent, and as the world. So it is important to look into those human rights aspects that do not necessarily affect an individual, but everybody.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And on my far right Paul Kiria Mkalere, the Communications and Advocacy Officer, African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, good afternoon, viewers. My name is Paul Kiria Mkalere. I'm a lawyer by profession, but in charge of communications and advocacy at the African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims. We basically do the work of treating, rehabilitating survivors of torture, advocating for legal and policy reforms. So that is mainly what we do. We're a team of medical doctors, lawyers, psychologists, physiotherapists doing this work. With the head office in Kanyanya, Kampala, then we have an office in Gulu, Kabong, in Karamoja, and also in Kasese, Maliba sub-county. I'm happy to join the conversation.
We are happy to have you here. Yeah. So after that wonderful introduction, I'll just remind the viewers at home who are watching, the theme for this International Human Rights Day nationally is environmental rights, reducing inequalities in the enforcement of environmental rights and in the mitigation of the impact of environmental degradation in Uganda. And that's where our discussion is going to rotate. And first, I want to come to you, Mr. Chimbugwe, from Refugee Law Project. How relevant are environmental rights to refugee protection, and also what are environmental rights for viewers who are watching at home?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I think environmental rights and human rights are intertwined. I believe you cannot enjoy your human rights if you do not have a right to a clean and healthy environment, and we can also not have a sustainable environmental governance without having a proper framework for human rights. So they are intertwined. You cannot have one without the other, and I think that is where the term that people use these days, a right to a clean and healthy environment, comes from. This right has now been recognized by the UN Council, and it has become a substantive right. So normally when you talk about refugees, normally people always think about people escaping persecution on grounds of race, sex, political opinion, so on and so forth. Little at times do we always do we address our minds to people who may actually be migrating from places because of the harsh environmental reasons or occurrences. I'll give a very big example. There's a country in the South Pacific called Tuvalu. It's a very small island, and because of the current climate change, the island has now been engulfed, and people do not have where to stay. So we're having people leaving Tuvalu to go to other places to go and seek for, refuge. Where can we stay? Where can we get food? And all those sorts of things. So those people cannot enjoy their human rights when the environment has been degraded. They have no place to stay. So environmental rights are very important to refugee protection in that sense. They're intertwined. You cannot have one without the other.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'll move to Paul. Yes. How does environmental degradation exacerbate the vulnerability of torture survivors and vulnerable groups?
Yes, thank you. In terms of, just like Conrad has hinted, that rights move hand in hand. It is like a chain. When you abuse or violate the right to food, you are indirectly violating someone's right to work, indirectly right to life, to health, etc. Now, when you look at issues to do with civil and political rights, for instance, torture, you have seen scenarios where people have been violated or abused when it comes to enforcement of some of these environmental laws, policies, directives from authorities. You find, and let us just sample them. You look at the fish landing sites. You look at the mining areas, Mwende, Karamoja. You look at a number of them, name them. It comes to enforcement. So enforcing environmental laws and regulations does not negate your respect for the human dignity.
The human rights.
So, in essence, rights, when we talk about how are victims affected, a number of them, the right to property. If my right to property has been violated, because they are saying you are not supposed to stay here, and I'm supposed to move, in one or the other, the defendants are going to suffer. The other time I was looking at the Chitezi effect, that I said, oh, I wish a journalist could go into digging the psychological impact of the Chitezi incident. Lives were lost, people were displaced. Up to now, I don't think there is justice which has been realized. The compensatory awards were not commensurate to the loss. But all these are environmental issues we are looking at. And so for me, when you look at how do people suffer, both, like Mr. Kamadi said, both the primary and secondary survivors feel the pinch. So that is why environment is very important here. A number of NGOs have gone into the issue of environmental rights. And people are saying, now, how does environment relate to human rights? But you see, at the end of the day, it is the human being who is supposed to make sure the environment is what? Is habitable. But also, as a duty bearer, the enforcement agencies, when you look at environmental police, NEMA, name them, they are supposed to enforce these laws and policies in a way which does not violate the other, or abuse the other rights. So that is the dilemma we are in, that how do you make sure, because I will say, okay, look here, selective, and you are saying equality, reducing inequalities. So there is an implication of selective application of policies. And that is the challenge law enforcement agencies have, that as we're enforcing, can you be impartial? Why should an investor be there, and then you are saying you're not supposed to build here? And also it goes hand in hand with issues to do with gaps in information flow. People don't know, why am I leaving this place? So it is an elephant. Yeah.
Indeed. I want to bring in Mr. Bionavi. You mentioned earlier that as Uganda Human Rights Commission, one of your mandates is to monitor and investigate on justice and human rights in Uganda. What are some of the key findings or cases that you have probably witnessed or reported on, and what steps is Uganda Human Rights Commission taking to create public awareness about environmental rights? Because honestly, from what Paul and Mr. Chimbuga has mentioned, there are some people who feel, how do the two correlate? You know, human environmental rights, how do they affect me? So what are you doing to actually create that awareness that is needed?
What we are doing starts with the discussion we are having here today. The Uganda Human Rights Commission has been chairing meetings of partners in preparation for this International Human Rights Day. As you are aware, there is an international theme, but we localized it here, and with the partners, we agreed that let us focus on environmental rights. That is point number one. Because the right to a clean and healthy environment is well provided for in our Constitution, Article 39. And quite often, there are rights that tend to be neglected. It's very easy for people to know right to life, right to food, right to education, but all those rights are enjoyed from somewhere.
Yes.
He has given a very good living example of an entire nation struggling where to live, you know.
Sure.
So when you look at issues of forest cover in this country, it is dwindling successively. Now, when forests are degraded, you affect the entire ecosystem. If you don't have rains, then you will plant beans and they don't make it beyond germination.
Sure.
The right to food is already being affected. The right to health. You need to, when I came here, I complained about the AC, and it has not yet been regulated. I believe somebody is hearing me out, you know.
They have had it.
Yeah. So when there are no rains, when the dry spell hits, you know, there is pollution. You see this, sometimes you look around Kampala here and the air is polluted. You know, dust and etc. All those are effects of environmental degradation. Now, as Uganda Human Rights Commission, we have picked serious interest in this matter because all the other rights must be enjoyed by people who are living in a clean and healthy environment. That's why in the 25th annual report to Parliament, we focused on environmental degradation and its human rights implications. It's a full chapter 2 actually of that report, and I would encourage our listeners to look out for it and read the details, because the 1 hour we have here is not enough to digest what everything is entailed therein. So environmental rights are very, very fundamental for human survival, and whatever we do as a country, as humanity, it's about people. Development is for the people. Everything we do is people-centered. So as Uganda Human Rights Commission, we are monitoring the extent to which environmental rights are being respected or not, and that's why I'm talking about what is entailed in our 25th annual report to Parliament, a full chapter on environmental degradation and its human rights implications. But we have also embarked on deliberate awareness creation, because like you are asking here, some people are yet to appreciate the role of the environment in facilitating the enjoyment of other rights. Yet it is very, very critical, and if we don't take it seriously, we will find ourselves where we can't survive, you know, on the roads, in the villages, and wherever we live. You have seen in some countries temperatures going beyond expected levels, and people dropping down, dropping dead.
Heat waves.
Yes, yeah, heat waves. This is all has to do with the environment, and it requires a lot of public awareness and appreciation by everybody in this country that this is something we must take seriously. Government is trying, but I think there is a challenge in enforcement. Just as this theme suggests, we have challenges with enforcement. Some duty bearers do not want to implement the existing laws. Those who are charged with enforcing them do so sometimes selectively. Last evening I was listening to the Inspector General of Government on the hot seat at KFM, your sister media house here in the Nation Media Group, and she was talking about the powerful people in this country, the untouchables, you know, who want to construct in wetlands, and then nobody should talk about them. But they should be reminded of what we call sustainable development. You are putting a structure in the wetland today, and you think you are getting profits. Probably you have children. If you don't have children, your sister has children or your neighbor. Now, we should develop while putting into consideration the future generations. Sustainable development. The heat waves may not catch up with you today, you who is degrading the wetland, but your grandson will say, who did this? And start cursing you long when you are gone.
Indeed.
So it is a complex issue that we need to look at carefully and urge the duty bearers, especially people in government, NEMA, Ministry of Water and Environment, and all those charged with the protection and promotion of human rights. But also, we the citizens, the rights holders, we are also not entirely clean, because we are the ones invading wetlands, forests without listening. And when the law enforcement officers come to say, please get out, we claim how we have been here for generations. But that doesn't make it a right if you have invaded a wetland and the laws are in place. There have been arguments, for instance, right now, we look at the marginalized, the most vulnerable in the protection and promotion of human rights, but these ones should also be told of their duties and responsibilities. It's not a license because you are vulnerable to violate the law. That must be very clear. And that is the struggle we are now doing. You've heard the president talk about people who resettled in wetlands in the eastern part of the country, Kibimba Rice Scheme and neighboring places, that those ones government will help them. But these ones who invade the wetlands on their own, and now they are told to leave and they don't want to leave, we need to strike a balance. They should be sensitized that what you are doing is not right, and then they leave. But there are those who are told the right thing to do, they understand, but they
have no way out.
They have no way out, and they say we shall remain here. Now, when law enforcement comes in as the last recourse mechanism, they are left with no options, except what we urge to law enforcement officers is to use a human rights-based approach. You don't evict people in the night. You don't evict people when it's raining. You don't evict people violently. Speak to them and urge them to live with dignity. Yeah.
Mr. You've mentioned, I think, 3 things that contribute to harming the environmental rights: forest degradation, settling in swamps.
Yes.
And probably the third, it has escaped my mind. But what other ways are the Mwananchis, the viewers, the citizens of Uganda contributing to hurting our environment?
Look at the energy we use in this country. Firewood. In most villages, but even in urban centers, there is charcoal. The only difference is in urban centers, you cut the wood and you burn it, I think for purposes of easy transportation. Yeah. But in the villages, directly, logs, wood is cut and used for cooking. Now, that is one of the major areas causing environmental degradation. I remember government had come up with a program when I was still a young man in senior 1, cut 1, plant 10. I remember personally planting some trees under that campaign. I had not cut any, but I just contributed to.
Are they still there?
That is a big question now. Yeah. So energy, sources of energy, it's one area that is contributing to environmental degradation. But also waste disposal. In this country and this town here, it is part of the major causes of environmental degradation. You know, how do we dispose of our waste? It has failed to sink in many of us Ugandans. The other day I was just here in Nakasero near All Saints Church. I saw somebody you would expect to be responsible enough dropping an empty bottle of soda after drinking here in town here, Central Business District. You know, a talk of Kavera, you know, we still have people who dispose of waste in 2 gullies, you know. In most towns, urban centers, they are filthy. You know, that is a right to a clean and healthy environment. We must start with ourselves. We need, if we can't do it on our own, we need people to lead us. A rigorous and well deliberate campaign to ensure that the environment is saved. Otherwise, it is a risk for disaster if we don't care about the environment as a serious issue.
Indeed. And just a reminder for you who's watching at home, we are having a conversation on environmental rights, because today is International Human Rights Day. do not think that if you misuse your environmental rights, they are not going to affect your other rights. This is something to learn. This is something to experience. This is something to remember. Go to our social media platforms and share your experiences, share your knowledge, and just share so that other people who might not know get to know something about that. Now, I want to move to Mr. Chimbugwe. Refugee Law Project. In terms of looking at the refugees that probably come here in Uganda, as we, the host communities, what are some of those challenges that the host communities and also the refugees face in accessing and protecting environmental resources, but also just to be able to exercise the environmental rights?
Yes. So I'm glad you asked that, because we have to look at the environmental question from both aspects, the refugees and the nationals. Now, most of times the refugees have been the easy scapegoats. You know, our environment is being degraded. Oh, the refugees.
They don't know how
they don't know how to do it exactly, and all those sorts of things. But we have to look ourselves in our hearts. We have to look through the mirror. Like my colleague Kamadi says, even us as nationals are contributing largely to the environmental degradation and climate change in Uganda. There are some things that cut across. He mentioned energy sources that we use to cook. I mean, refugees need to survive, nationals need to survive. And there's a famous former legislator who has been taking on a fight against you know, firewood and all that kind of thing. You find that firewood not only helps the refugees, but also helps the nationals. So we're all consuming and we're all contributing to environmental degradation and climate change. But if you look at the problems that come in that affect both the refugees and nationals because of climate change, they cut across. For example, sanitation and the issue of sanitation and the clean environment. I mean, when there's some areas I've been in Uganda where you find a whole community is utilizing one toilet, one latrine, one pit latrine, and it's a very sad, sorry state, okay? So what happens is people now begin depositing waste all over everywhere. It leads to diseases such as cholera and all those sorts of things. That is a problem that affects both the refugees in refugee settlements, but also affects some of our nationals in some of the underdeveloped places where they stay. Look at pollution in regards to plastic waste. In very many advanced countries, even our neighbors here, I think they're not using a lot of waste plastics anymore. But unfortunately for us, we still use caveras. He mentioned the example of soda. We don't have a culture of disposing of this waste very well. Yeah. After drinking, I'm in my car, I just open the window and poop, I throw it out there. In the long run, that is going to, it leads to environmental degradation. Look at access to clean water. Right? Because my colleague again talked about people who are building in wetlands. You know, we have industries that are being built in wetlands. They're polluting water, they're polluting the air. At the end of the day, the water that is being accessed by both refugees and nationals is not clean, affecting right to access to water, access to health. Like energy sources, as already mentioned, proper housing. Okay, that is a challenge that faces both refugees and nationals. You know, you find people who have set up, for lack of a better word, I want to call it shacks maybe. They're going and cutting down these trees from forests so that they can try and put up proper structures where they can put their head at night. That is a challenge that faces both refugees and both nationals. So the challenges that come with environmental degradation or climate change, number one, are not only caused by refugees, right, but they're also caused by nationals. And unfortunately, they don't only affect one sector of people. It is the negative impacts of environmental degradation and climate change will cut across. They will affect me, the national, and they will affect the refugee. So I don't like the narrative of people going around saying, oh, it's the refugees who are doing this. They're cutting down our trees. They're taking out this and that. No, even us as nationals, we have a role we play a role we play that contributes largely to environmental degradation and climate change in Uganda. Yes.
Just elaborate more on some of the challenges that probably I, as a good citizen, might face if I actually want to really abide by the law and by the rights of the environment to keep it safe.
Yes.
What are some of those?
So I'll begin. The most immediate one is the climate change. I think recently, I think it was the middle of the year, there was a very huge heat wave that was going around in Kampala. I think it hit us for maybe a month or two. Me, who does not dispose of waste, who disposes waste in the road anywhere I find, and the very good citizen who abides by the laws and going to say, no, I'm going to go to a designated rubbish bin and put it there, we're all going to face the same challenges. There was the rise of water levels in Lake Victoria, the flooding, right? People's houses, people have nice fancy houses in uptown suburbs by Munyonyo and TC. When that water rises and floods, it doesn't matter if you are a very good law-abiding citizen, or the challenges will still be faced by all of us. Yes, when we have diseases, outbreaks of diseases like cholera, which are caused by us not having a clean and healthy environment, the cholera will not segregate that I'm going to attack Paul,
of course,
who did not do things right, and then I'll leave Mr. Chimbugwe, who did these things right. Yes, so even as the law-abiding citizen who's doing things the right way, you will still be affected the same way.
All right.
Yeah.
Paul, as an organization that advocates for torture victims, who probably victims of violence and conflicts around the country, around the world, could you elaborate on cases where environmental harm has been directly linked to human rights abuses, such as what you mentioned earlier, this forced displacement?
Yes, thank you. You have seen recently there is something, when we talk about human rights defenders, I've always asked people, do you know who a human rights defender is? Do you know that even a journalist is a human rights defender? Some people think that you need to have a certificate or to go to school to defend human rights. Even someone in Seka Market there who fights for other people's rights peacefully is a human rights defender. Now, you have seen, remember, in the Albertine region, you have seen scenarios where people were demonstrating cutting a natural forest. You are seeing someone is saying, no, we need this. But instead, the law enforcer who is supposed to protect this person to demonstrate peacefully, again is occasioning harm, the beating, the arrests, etc. So it is among the clearest examples. I remember there is someone who got a name out of defending natural forests here in Uganda. You know that name, Mavira. Mavira. It became a crime to defend nature. You see? Yeah. Just like recently here, how it became a crime to demand accountability for corruption and also punishment. Like what Mr. Kamadi has hinted on, people don't know that a human rights-based approach is important in everything. And what are we talking about? Participation. Allow people to engage the people. If you're a local leader, engage the locals who are affected. They then participate. You shouldn't just engage them when you're looking for 100 signatures to stand for a political position. That is when I've seen a human rights-based approach being used of participation. But even in all these things, if you are to displace people, even they would do that, the landslides in would do that, because environmental degradation can come out as a result of man-made action or even the natural consequences. If you want to shift or relocate these people to another place, engage them. The dignity is important. Accountability. Some people even fear writing. I'm very sure the number of journalists who fear writing articles about some of these things. You can never know that environmental issues or rights are sensitive until you write an article about them. Someone say that Mavira Forest, it is only on the road. When you go behind, I was surprised that even there are schools out behind there. You see, so, but you are telling someone, a local, move away from here, I'm enforcing rights, I'm a NEMA. But someone is building a school in Mavira Forest. Someone is settling there. So the selective application, when you look at non-discrimination, why should civil society organizations have come up time and again, even there are lawyers, who have come up to defend people speaking, freedom of expression. Are you seeing how rights now are intertwined? We're talking about the environment, but in one way or the other, if I come out to demand accountability, in one way or the other, my freedom to express myself can be curtailed. Why speaking? Even writing on a flip chart, and I stand and I say, we need our forest, you find I'm being arrested. Why? Is there a crime? So that is when you talk about reducing inequalities. Inequalities can only be reduced when the human rights-based approach is mainstreamed into our DNA. The issue of participation, accountability, non-discrimination, empowering people. People should be empowered to speak. You see, you as a law enforcement agent, you should be able to listen. If someone is expressing their dissatisfaction, then this is a collective. But when you find someone saying, there's a time I was so disappointed when someone was busy, I won't mention his name, that there was an investor pouring soil in a lake to construct a hotel. And when people were making noise over it, that's what said, no, this person is creating thousands of jobs for people. So issues where priorities, and you see, so that is the challenge we have, that you find people, even the issue of environment. I am very happy you asked Conrad, what are environmental rights? Do people even know them? Because people only talk about trees, etc., but it is broader than that. The other time I was joking that if there is anyone who would be arrested for environmental degradation, it is the carpenters. But then someone said, look here.
They'll tell you they are doing their job. Someone
said, look here. You look at people's houses, only timber.
Yeah.
Look at people in schools sitting on timber. So when Kawad was saying that cut 1, plant 10, I think some of these things also need to be in our DNA, but also the issue of accountability. You're not going to tell me plant a tree, yet you are cutting a natural forest and planting sugar canes there. You are saying.
Have you observed cases of torture victims who have been as a result of trying to defend environmental rights?
Yes, the example I gave in Albertine region of the forest, which most people, even there's an organization called the Environmental Shield. It was very emphatic on that issue. Even it went up to court. You are seeing a number of human rights defenders were beaten. Some of them unlawfully arrested. But why? Because they were defending a forest. Even when it comes to the oil issue, the oil, the Bunyoro region, still people demanding for, no, this should be an open thing. When you look at Mubende, when you go to Mubende, oil, the gold, the mining, the issue, when you interact with those people, still they raise issues of torture. You see, when you go to the landing sites, the fish landing sites, we have a number of victims who are as a result of torture.
Yeah.
I even, because if I use the word serious beating, someone say, okay, what is not a serious beating? There is someone who one time said, we don't torture like that. You remember that? So when you look at all these things, yes, you want legal fishing methods to be carried out on the site, but is that how you enforce the lawful fishing? Can't you sensitize? Can't you change the approach? Can't you provide the best fishing nets? You are seeing, so all these things, that's why when you find torture is littered all over when it comes to how do you enforce the environmental concerns,
Indeed.
The enforcement.
And
yes.
at that juncture, I want to bring in Mr. Kamadi on this issue. What is the role of Uganda Human Rights Commission in advocating for and also protecting environmental rights as a broader human rights discussion and advocacy?
The role of the commission is at various levels. The most important level, and which we need and which we are handling right now, is creating awareness. awareness sounds an everyday word, but it's not exactly simple as we take it. Because the people you even think are aware, they are not aware. There is a lot of talk of mindset change, trying to think that maybe people who live at the grassroots in the village, they are the ones who are supposed to be guided. But the real culprits are here in the center. The duty bearers, they need mindset change. Indeed. And deliberately, to bring people in one room and tell them, yes, he has brought an example of development, that somebody is degrading a lake, yeah, building a hotel, and providing employment. But in this very discussion, he raised an issue that hotel will 5 years to come be flooded and submerged. True. Now, these people who got jobs there, if they are not careful, they may end up drowning. That's why we are talking about sustainable development. I know the head of state is interested in socio-economic transformation. You will not transform if you don't look at this as a conveyor belt. Therefore, awareness is very, very important, and that is where we are placing a lot of interest, calling upon partners on this International Human Rights Day. And I'm happy Refugee Law Project is here, African Center for Rehabilitation of Torture Victims is here, and you can see how this discussion brings out issues of freedom of expression being curtailed because of environment. Somebody speaking out on environmental rights being arrested, and his or her right to personal liberty being violated. Somebody speaking out on pollution, and some duty bearer somewhere doesn't understand that what this person is talking about even affects me and everybody. Indeed. So we have embarked on capacity building, awareness. In my view, we need to begin with the duty bearers. These very people who think they are causing development, but development which is short-lived. We are talking about the Agenda 2030, sustainable development goals. You know, what you are doing today should not compromise the needs of the future generations. Now, secondly, we are doing monitoring and documentation, because some of these duty bearers are good at challenging what human rights defenders do. So if you don't have statistics, real names, age, and of people like the ones Paul is talking about, who are beaten up, arrested, they will say that is hearsay. Yeah. So we do monitor, document, in order to do evidence-based advocacy, which is watertight. Otherwise, the human rights violators are very good at challenging people who are protecting people's rights. We've monitored the issue of Bugoma Forest. He's talking about Zoka Forest in Germany and other related places. And the findings are in our new reports to Parliament. Now, what we would like Parliament to do is to hold accountable the relevant MDAs that are supposed to ensure that these safe spaces are protected. Our role is we sensitize, we monitor, document, and make recommendations. Some people accuse us of not doing much without knowing that we have already done our part, and then they should ask the relevant committees of Parliament to hold those MDAs responsible, accountable. But we also receive complaints of human rights violations. So we urge the public, if they have environmental related rights, to come out, speak out, and report. We investigate and offer remedies based on the findings from our investigations.
You mentioned receiving reports. How do you address such complaints that are related to human rights and environmental rights abuse?
We have an admissibility criteria. Article 52 of the Constitution provides for, mandates the Uganda Human Rights Commission to investigate complaints of human rights violations at its own initiative or on a complaint made by anybody. So it doesn't matter whether the right in issue is environmental in nature or not. We have a standard practice of investigating cases of human rights violations. So at any time that case is brought, it is subjected to the procedures in place and investigated accordingly. We have handled the cases. For instance, I remember there was a lagoon in Hoima town there a few years back that was causing a problem to the neighboring communities. You know, some of these things, the commission handles them by inviting the concerned authorities, and we mediate. You speak to the person who is causing a problem to the people, and you come up with a memorandum of understanding, you give an advisory, and something is sorted out. So I urge the public, people who are listening to us, if they have complaints of that nature, to access the Commission's offices. They will be investigated and the remedies given according to our findings.
There is no online option?
We have a UHRC app. Yeah, it can be downloaded and you lodge a complaint. We have toll-free lines, which I don't have off cuff here, but they are available. Yes. They are toll-free lines. You can send an email.
Website, probably.
You can send an email, uhrc@uhrc.ug. That one, I know it is handled at the center here. Whether you are in Igulu or Rukabale, your matter will be forwarded there. But we would like to see everybody being empowered and speaking out. Time has gone for seeing a wrong being done and you simply lament.
True.
And you keep quiet. That one voice can mean a lot to so many people. And it doesn't have to be you, even if it's a neighbor. And for you have had an opportunity to listen to this program, help the neighbor, help a friend. At the end of the day, environmental rights affect each and everybody.
In the community?
Yes.
Conrad?
Yeah.
Could you highlight some of the initiatives that a Refugee Law Project has taken in order to address environmental concerns in refugee hosting areas?
Thank you so much. Yes, so as the Refugee Law Project, we try so much to incorporate environmental initiatives in our programming. So, for example, we have done a lot of environmental advocacy and awareness, going to refugee hosting communities and teaching them about the benefits of preserving the environment, sustainable usage of resources, and we have a lot of environment IEC material, information educational material that teaching our communities, think pamphlets and all those sorts of things. Literally try and teach people about their environment and the benefits of them protecting their environment. But then also majorly, I think, to be hands-on, we have a lot of projects in refugee hosting communities. For example, in Chiandongo, we have a program that is focused on building, planting forests. Okay, so we have a lot of refugees staying in that area, and there's a lot of forests that are being cut down because they want to get wood fuel and all those sorts of things. So in our programming, we come up with ways and projects to go in there, plant trees, regress those negative effects of environmental degradation that may be that refugees may have contributed in those refugee hosting communities.
All right.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes, please.
As the African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, what innovative strategies are you putting in place or adopting to address environmental concerns in the areas that societies and communities that you work with?
At least one thing which we have cautiously pursued is building networks with NGOs whose bias is environmental rights. and it has been intentional because we chair the coalition against torture in Uganda. Even the Uganda Human Rights Commission is a partner to that coalition. Even the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders is a partner. Refugee Law Project is a member. So in that coalition, there are members in different regions who specifically handle environmental issues. Now, that is where we get the platform to discuss issues to do with the environment, but also how to reach out to people in need in terms of support. So it is both preventive in terms of awareness, and also dialogue with the area leaders in terms of how to handle some of these issues. Then also the response is how you come into support, give redress. It can be legal, it can be treatment, etc. In fact, there is someone who was, when you look at, that's why I say that environment, when you are in this fora, like Mr. Kamadi has said, that when you talk about empowerment, people think it is for someone down there in the village. But even NGOs, very few of them appreciate the nexus between environment and rights. They are even, when we were coming up with this theme, someone saying, how are these things connected? And for me, I say now this one needs a full lecture. So you can imagine, even if NGOs, you feel they are up there, they are also struggling to appreciate the nexus between environment and rights. And some of them even, they only look at it in terms of trees. You think? But it is wide, it is broad. When you look at all the natural resources, and that's why someone was saying that, why is it that natural resources have been militarized?
Well, one can save to protect them.
Someone was saying that, no, to fight corruption, but now. so that is, so there is a lot we need to dialogue with these institutions.
The constant reminding,
exactly.
Constant creating of awareness.
There are some people I know who are no longer, we are fishermen, but they no longer go to fishing. Say, well, because even livelihood is dependent on the environment. And respect for environmental rights.
As we conclude the conversation today, because we are running out of time, I want to bring in Mr. Bionabi. What are the gaps in Uganda's legal framework regarding environmental protection?
To be sincere, I don't see any gaps. The gap is in implementation and enforcement. Yeah.
But the policies, the laws are there.
The policies are there, the laws are there. One day I was interviewing somebody from NEMA on these environmental rights we are talking about at senior level. And I said, where I stay, there is a valley. But every day I'm seeing trucks of soil being poured there, and that place is
reclaiming the land.
Yeah, it's not very far from here. I asked that officer, "Are you aware? Do you know what I'm talking about?" The gentleman told me, "My friend, some of those people are untouchable." That's where the problem is. We've just been going through the rule of law week a few weeks ago. What we need is to create awareness on the rule of law. You see, the law is blind. Let it apply to everybody without discrimination. You know, whether you are big, small, poor or rich, if you are doing something that is a threat to the nation, you should be told. So the gap is in enforcement, and that's why our theme today is addressing inequalities in enforcement.
And
this theme
rights.
Was carefully selected.
Indeed.
We don't want maybe some amendments can come in future.
In the future.
If the current ones are not working for us.
Indeed.
But let us implement the existing laws.
Gentlemen, we have run out of time. There's so much to talk about, there's so much to say, but thank you so much for coming through and having this wonderful conversation. And for you who has been watching us, please, it's a great honor to have such dialogues and remind ourselves of what is important. And today is International Human Rights Day. Go and refresh yourself. Look at the rights that probably you are not following or you are abusing, and start today, because there is nothing more important than starting today and being the change that you want to see today and tomorrow. I've been with Conrad Chimbugwe, who is a legal officer at the Refugee Law Project, Mr. Bionabi Kamadi, the Director of Research, Education and Documentation, Uganda Human Rights Commission, and Paul Kiria Makarere, the Communications and Advocacy Officer, African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims. That's all that we had for you today on this special dialogue. If you missed it, go to our social media platforms, that is on Twitter, YouTube, and our website, which is ntv.co.ug, and you can be able to recap on our dialogue and conversation and stay informed well. Thank you so much. Goodbye.